Snow was falling in soft, whispering waves across the Wyoming valley when rancher Cole Maddox stepped out of his cabin to check the night fences. But the moment he opened the door, the storm wind carried a faint sound, something between a whimper and a plea, and when he turned, lantern in hand, he saw her, a little girl no older than 5, cheeks flushed bright pink from the cold, clutching a handmade doll to her chest as though it were the last warm thing in the world. She stood at the edge of his porch, trembling, boots half covered in snow, her blonde curls dotted with frozen flakes, her blue eyes wide and scared but determined enough to bring her here. Cole lowered the lantern and knelt down slowly, not wanting to spook her. He extended his hand gently as he asked, "Sweetheart, what are you doing out in a storm like this?" She swallowed hard, voice shaky, and whispered the words that punched through him like a bullet. "Sir, my mom didn't come home last night." Cole felt every muscle go tight. This part of the valley was unforgiving, especially in winter, and people didn't just disappear without reason. He asked her name, and she said Annie, hugging her doll tighter, the wind howling around them like a warning. Annie explained that her mother had gone to town before sunset yesterday to trade for medicine and food, promising she'd be home before the blizzard rolled in. But morning came, then nightfall again, and still no sign of her. Their cabin stove had gone cold, and Annie, terrified, remembered seeing Cole a few times in town, the man with the warm light. So she followed the faint glow of his lanterns along the ridge despite the threatening storm. Cole felt something old and protective rise in him, something he hadn't felt since the war or since losing his own family years ago, an instinct that screamed, "Get her warm, then go find her mother." He scooped Annie into his arms and ushered her inside his log cabin, where the fire crackled strong and the smell of pine filled the room. As she thawed beside the flames, he fixed her warm milk and wrapped her in a thick wool blanket. She told him about their life in a tiny cabin deeper in the woods, how her mother worked odd jobs and barely scraped through the winter, how sickness had weakened her, and how Annie feared something bad had happened in the storm. Cole listened closely, piecing together every detail, and the more she spoke, the more he realized her mother must have taken the shortcut trail along the ravine, the same area where wolves had been spotted and where snowdrifts swallowed entire paths. Cole grabbed his coat, loaded his rifle, filled his lantern, and saddled his strongest horse, Blaze. Annie stood at the door, fear trembling in her lips as she asked if she could come. Cole crouched down and told her gently but firmly, "I'll bring your mama home, but you stay here where it's warm and safe." "I promise you, Annie." Her small hand wrapped around his thumb, trusting him with everything she had left in this world, and that was all the push he needed. With the storm thickening and night closing in, Cole rode into the snow, lantern swinging, heart pounding, with a certainty he couldn't shake. Whatever happened to Annie's mother? He had only hours before the cold claimed her, and as his horse braved the brutal wind, Cole Maddox vowed silently, "No child will lose their mama tonight. Not on my land. Not while I'm breathing." If you're still reading, don't forget to subscribe. Stories like this are only just beginning. The storm beat against Cole like a living beast, roaring up from the valley and slamming into him, with icy fists as Blaze trudged through deepening snow. But he pushed forward, guided only by instinct, a lantern beam, and the desperate memory of Annie's trembling voice. The trail her mother likely took was nearly buried, but Cole searched the edges for signs, a broken branch, footprints before the snowfall thickened, anything, and after nearly an hour he spotted something that jolted him to full alertness. A small leather pouch half covered in snow, its stitching identical to the one Annie had described. He dismounted, heart pounding, and examined the ground. There were faint drag marks leading toward the ravine, as if someone had slipped or struggled. Cole followed them carefully, calling out, "Ma'am, can you hear me?" But the valley swallowed his voice. He moved deeper until the faint glimmer of crushed brush caught his eye. At the bottom of a shallow slope lay a figure half buried in snow, one arm outstretched as if reaching for help she never found. Cole scrambled down, lantern shaking in his grip, and brushed the snow from her face. She was pale, barely conscious, lips blue, breath shallow. Annie's mother was alive, but fading fast. "Ma'am, stay with me," he urged, lifting her gently. Her eyelids fluttered, and she whispered something he had to lean close to hear. "My Annie." Cole felt his chest burn. "She's safe. She came to me," he assured her. but she was slipping into a frozen sleep she might never wake from. He wrapped her in his coat, hoisted her over his shoulder, and began the brutal climb back up the slope. The wind fought him every step, threatening to knock both of them down, but Cole didn't stop. The thought of Annie sitting in his cabin, staring at the door waiting for her mother, fueled him until he reached Blaze and lifted her onto the saddle. The journey back was slow, agonizing. Twice Blaze nearly stumbled in the drifts, and at one point, Cole felt the weight of exhaustion pulling at him, whispering that the storm was too strong, but he clenched his jaw. He had made a promise. As they approached his cabin, he saw a tiny figure standing on the porch, blanket trailing behind her, hair whipping wildly in the wind. Annie. Somehow she had sensed them returning. When Cole rode up, Annie rushed forward, crying, "Mama!" He lifted her down gently before guiding her mother inside. He laid the woman near the fire, rubbing her hands, checking her breathing, warming her feet with blankets and heated stones. Annie knelt beside her, small hands stroking her mother's face, whispering, "Mama, wake up. I'm here." Minutes crawled by like hours until finally, her mother's eyes opened, weak but alive. A sob escaped Annie as she wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. Cole stepped back quietly, letting them have their moment, feeling a warmth rise inside him that had nothing to do with the fire. When the danger passed, Annie's mother looked at Cole through grateful, teary eyes and whispered, "Thank you for saving us." Cole shook his head softly. "You saved yourself by having a daughter, brave enough to find help." The storm outside raged on, but inside that small cabin, the warmth of safety, family, and hope filled every corner. Cole prepared them hot soup, tended to the mother's injuries, and built the fire high enough to chase the cold from their bones. Annie would not leave his side, sometimes holding his hand, sometimes leaning on him with the comfort of a child who finally felt safe. By morning the storm died down, sunlight breaking through the frosted windows, and the valley glimmered with new life. Annie's mother rested peacefully, no longer in danger, and Annie watched the sun rise from Cole's porch, her tiny hand wrapped around his proudly. Cole realized then that maybe he hadn't just rescued a family, maybe fate had brought them to his doorstep because he, too, needed saving from his loneliness. As his horses whinnied in the distance and the scent of pine filled the morning air, he felt something unfamiliar but welcome, the beginning of a new chapter, one he hadn't seen coming. And for everyone listening to this story, if you want more powerful, emotional, heart-touching tales like this, make sure you subscribe because the next story might just be the one that steals your heart.